everyone. Can everyone hear me? Great. So welcome to the Creating an Inclusive Culture panel. We really appreciate you selecting us as one of the panels. My name is Carolina Waranka, and I am currently a principal at a venture capital firm named Kport Capital. We're a social impact seed stage firm that invests in tech entrepreneurs that are closing gaps of opportunity and access for the low income and underserved communities. So it's a pleasure to have you all here. To give context of how I want to structure our panel today, just want to give a little bit of an overview of what the panel looks like, get a sense of who's in the audience, and then dive in to talking to each of our panelists, who are all C-level executives at startup companies. So it's a rare treat where we get to talk to C-level folks, getting their opinion on this very, very important topic at the time. So as everyone knows, diversity and inclusion has kind of become a hot topic, the buzzword that everyone's talking about. We've recently had publications come out with numbers of Google and Twitter numbers, and as we all know, those numbers have been abysmal when we actually think about representation of gender and underrepresented minority groups in tech. And often the conversation goes to who really is responsible for setting a culture of inclusiveness and diverse audiences to be part of this tech ecosystem. And often the conversation stems to the CEOs. So CEOs in many cases have been getting negative press, aren't really talking about this issue. So as I said, it's a real gem to have the opportunity to do that today here. So let me get a sense of who is in the room. So are there currently D&I professionals? If you can raise your hand. If there are there currently CEOs of tech companies or people working at startup companies? If you can raise your hand very proudly. And then can you shout out what other types of professions folks are in here? Excuse me? Recruiting. So recruiting professionals, can you raise your hand if you're here too? Okay, perfect. So to start with diversity, one thing that I've noticed, even working at a venture fund, everyone has a very different definition of it. I have a definition of it, other venture funds, and even folks that are hiring. So I'd like to start the conversation with asking all our panelists how they define diversity. But before doing that, I apologize. I want each panelist to introduce themselves, say their title, one-line descriptor of their company, and then maybe some employee demographic information that you want to share to give a sense of how diverse your respective teams are.
Hi, thanks everybody. I'm Jess Gartner. I'm the CEO and founder of AlloView. We are a company that builds financial technology solutions for the K-12 education sector to help school districts figure out where they're spending money and where it's having the most impact for student achievement. We are 26 people right now. We are 35% people of color, 8% LGBT, 20% English as a second language, 20% first graduating member of college of their family, and 62% female.
I was supposed to have these. My name is Ben Geierhan. I'm the CEO and founder of Benestream, and what we do is we make Medicaid, food stamps, CHIP enrollment sort of a benefit that companies provide to their employees, and so we do a lot of that work with large companies. And I don't have the numbers yet, although we're over half on most of these numbers, in large part because most of what we do involves different languages. And so, to a large degree, fluency in a second language is a requirement in our company for 90% of the workforce. So I'm going to get the numbers at some point, and I will report them out.
That reflects huge amount of diversity, having people be bilingual. It's a great proxy for it.
Great. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jessica O. Matthews, and I'm the founder and CEO of Uncharted Play. We are a New York-based company that's really on a mission to democratize energy access worldwide. We make energy harvesting products, specifically the micro generators that are in energy harvesting products. Our core technology is called MORE. MORE stands for motion-based off-grid renewable energy. So we actually make kinetic custom micro energy harvesters that can be integrated into almost anything that moves, from strollers and soccer balls to floor panels and chairs, to turn that product into a source of power, giving people around the world access to clean, renewable, affordable energy when they need it. What's really exciting for me, because I actually have, I had all of our, I knew that we had a pretty diverse team, but I had my head of community send me what we have, and I'm actually really proud to share a little bit about what we've been able to do. So I run a hardware tech company in New York. It's already kind of weird and odd, and we just closed a really successful, at least for us, round of funding. In fact, it was the largest Series A that any black woman has ever raised in history. And thank you. Thank you. And I think that for us, the makeup of our team, the diversity of our team, really played a huge role. And so I feel very proud to share that at Uncharted Play, so we're currently 31 employees. Of those 31 employees, 55% is female, 10% is a member of the LGBT, 40% would be considered a member of the underrepresented communities in technology, 30% of them are African American, 10% are Latin American, but even more importantly, on our engineering team, 40% are female, 27% would be considered underrepresented members of tech, 20% are African American, 7% are Latino. I wouldn't even go into our executive team, which is just a bunch of black girls and gay men. Like, that's just what we do. And yet we're building tech for Fortune 100 companies where I'm often the only woman, almost always the only black person, teaching them what Bootylicious and Beyonce means. And so I'm so proud to be here on this panel with these amazing people. I'm so proud to be a part of this event. And I'm really excited to talk about what we've been doing as a company to get us there and hopefully be successful, though, in having this makeup.
Cool. Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Burnett, co-founder of Makers Row. I was actually looking at the stroller here. It was just when I was like, is there going to be a kid that comes out here? What's going to happen? But Makers Row, we're an online platform. We help small, medium-sized businesses produce products in the United States. About 60% of our staff is all female, and about 30% is African American, 20% is Latino. And one of the big things that we've recognized in this is that we're trying to democratize something that was highly, highly guarded. The Made in America was usually for the big name brands, but Made in America is much more prone to small and medium-sized development today. And so when we recognize that opportunity, we also recognize the huge opportunity to open up access to communities where entrepreneurs are underrepresented, African-American communities, LGBT communities, but also around the products that you find in stores. A lot of products that you find in stores are one size fits all. And so we oftentimes are trying to not only help entrepreneurs of color, but we're also trying to help them serve their own communities. And so that's a huge part of what we're doing right now with Makers Row as well.
Perfect. So now let's actually dive into that initial question that I have around how we define the concept of diversity. Matt, why don't you kick us off on your perspective? How do you define diversity?
That was a bad move. The goalpost keeps on getting moved, and what diversity means continues to evolve. And it's something that if you just rely upon what the media has to say about just inclusion, you're always going to be changing up your makeup. It's something where we constantly think about who we're involving, who we're bringing on to the team. And I think diversity means something different, quite honestly, for entrepreneurs of color versus entrepreneurs that are not of color. I've recognized that it's traditionally, like I was looking at this old Delta ad, and it was all of these people, and there's like one black guy in there, but he was all the way at the front. And so that's what I feel like inclusion and diversity used to look like, but now you're seeing much more of an impactful proportion of the community that's there are people of color and also females.
Perfect. How about you, Jess? And kind of go down. I'd like to get the perspective of every panelist.
Sure. In my opinion, I agree with Matt entirely. Like, diversity, for me, I just had a really big diversity hire because I just hired a straight white male, and I was like, yes, like, diversity, like, like, we need to mix it up. Like, but for me, what it ultimately means is, for at least at Uncharted Play, rather, is do you understand struggle? I personally believe that discomfort breeds innovation, that the best way to build the next new product and by the way, we're a New York-based company in Makers Row. Before I knew you and Tanya, they were a huge help in us doing our early prototyping. I'm a big fan of what you do. To me, the idea is how can you create something and make something if you have no reason to disrupt, if you have no reason to change the status quo. So anyone who understands struggle in some way, and that can mean your color of your skin, your gender, it can sometimes mean your age, your socioeconomic level, your whatever capabilities you have. If you understand struggle, then that opens up a conversation to be a part of our team. And we look at how we can harness that and turn that into a competitive advantage for you as an individual and for us as an entire company. And we've found that leads to a diversified makeup of our talent base. And that's often what we're looking for more than a specific type of person.
Okay, so I just got the numbers. Thank you. 48% white, 41% Hispanic Latino, 4% Asian, 3% African American, and 2 or more races, 4%. We don't count LGBT because we don't ask anybody. I'm actually interested to hear how people think about that. I mean, we could make some guesses, but I think that's probably not the right way to do that, right? But anyway, so those are numbers. So when we think about diversity, it really always comes back to mission for us. The driving force of what we do is around poverty alleviation and around servicing population. We spend a lot of time thinking about our client base. Who are we talking to? Are people, do we have people who are going to be either in the field or on the phones who have sensitivity around issues of poverty and around immigration and around a whole set of issues, because that's what they spend all day talking to our client base about, right? So that's the sort of starting point for every conversation, and that really changes the way we think about things. What it means is a couple of things. One, we don't want to be TFA, and I don't have any problem with Teach for America, but we don't want to have a bunch of college kids coming to us and working with us. Although we have that, we want people who come from, we don't want people, you were talking about struggle, we want people with struggles, because I think those are folks who are truly committed to the issues around poverty that we really want to focus our time on. And so, and it's also been great for us. I mean, we have people who really want to run through walls on mission, who work too hard and spend too much time doing their jobs, which is great.
I'm a TFA alum.
Okay.
We'll talk later. To me, at a most basic level, it's about having a variety of lived experiences and perspectives. My experience as a white woman is different than the experience of a black woman or a Hispanic man or a gay person on my team, and we want to make sure that we have those different lived experiences and perspectives as we build our products, as we create our approaches to customer service, as we come up with our marketing campaign. For us as an education company, I want our team to reflect the populations that we serve. The K-12 education market is not a bunch of white guys. And so a big part of it is about how do we reflect the population that we serve of kids and teachers and administrators in this country. One of my favorite responses to diversity is actually from Shonda Rhimes. You guys Grey's Anatomy fans? Yeah. So Shonda Rhimes, everybody's always like, oh my gosh, your shows are so diverse. You have such amazingly diverse cast. You're making TV so diverse. And she says, I'm not diversifying television, I'm normalizing television. There are black doctors. There are gay doctors. I am just putting on TV what exists in the world. And to me, a big part of having a diversity and inclusion initiative is about making your organization normalized to the population of the world and reflecting those different experiences and perspectives.
Got it. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's a big topic, but there are various kind of segments within that. There's the hiring piece, there's the recruiting, the retention, how you do performance evaluations, manage compensation, all of that. So would like to take the conversation, talk a little bit about the hiring process. So Jess, at Allovue, how do you kind of ensure that diversity and inclusion is at top of mind when you're going through creating your hiring processes and systems?
Sure. So this was a big priority to us from day one. And I think part of that is because as a female founder and CEO, I certainly experienced a lot of challenges and, a big struggle with fundraising, growing a team, all of it. It's, it's life on a harder setting. And we also are based in Baltimore. Baltimore is a majority minority city. Something seemed inherently wrong with having a very white or very male team in Baltimore. It is an incredibly diverse city. And again, we work in the education market, so I wanted us to reflect that population. So I knew as a CEO that I wanted diversity and inclusion to be a huge priority for us. However, as a CEO, there are 10 different things that are your number one priority every day. Right? You have to be thinking about sales. You have to be thinking about hiring. You have to be thinking about product. You have to be thinking about customer success and marketing and finance and fundraising. And so I said, okay, I know that this is likely to slip from my number one spot once in a while. And I don't want that to happen. So as soon as we raised Series A, I hired a director of talent. And her job is to wake up every morning making diversity and inclusion a priority at Allovue. And part of what she does is through our creating new recruitment and hiring processes. Part of what she does is helping us instill an inclusive culture at Allovue to ensure that as we hire those people, they're gonna stay at Allovue forever and do the best work of their lives. And part of it is just ensuring that that is a standardized process that is somebody's number one priority every day. And so bringing Crystal on as our director of talent to focus on that was my way of saying, this is important enough that we're gonna dedicate a human resource to this, right? I hire a chief of product, I hire a chief of technology, I hire a chief of finance and a chief of sales because I tell my investors and stakeholders and customers that those things are important. So how am I gonna say diversity and inclusion is important to us and not put a resource behind that? So that's what our director of talent does.
So definitely worth a lot of claps. So at Kport Capital, something we always talk about as investors is the fact that having diversity and inclusion baked in from day one is something that is imperative because we think it's a competitive advantage. So Jess, from Uncharted Play, I'd love to get your perspective on how you went about making sure D&I was baked in from day one.
Sure. For us, again, I think, first of all, I think that a lot of this does kind of happen based off of what people tend to just do as normal human beings. I think a lot of the issues with diversity at a lot of other companies is because people tend to hire what they look like, right? So for me, it's baked in at day one because I'm looking for people who I can relate to. And if in the interview you don't know what happened on Empire last week, I don't know if we have anything to talk about, and so forth and so on. So you'd be surprised how much of it just happens by making sure your executive team is diverse. And so, making sure that we have men and women and that we have people, we have people from the Latino background, African American background and whatnot, that already helps because you're just engaging with people on common terms. For us though specifically, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, I think that it's critically important for us from an innovation perspective to really be smart and strategic about where we mine our ideas from and how we think about meeting the needs of a global audience. We do a lot of work in the developing world, so we need to be close to the diaspora. We want to serve the needs of women. I mean, to develop an energy harvesting stroller. So as you're pushing the stroller, you can charge your cell phone. Was incredibly obvious to someone who in a few years will have a child and will have to push her kid and will need to have a fully charged cell phone so she can run her goddamn company. Like, it made sense to me. And it was very, very obvious. Or like a product we're working on a flexible generator that can be integrated into clothing, and it feels like clothing. And the idea came from the shirt, thick thighs save lives. I'm like, if my thighs are touching, I'm sure we can create an electromagnetic field between them, and then I can put my phone in my pocket and I can charge my phone. And I remember saying this to engineers. They're just like, what? And I was like, bootylicious, thick thighs save lives. Like it was a 3-step process for me. You didn't get there, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, to me, it's like they've said the next Einstein's going to be a woman, and she's either going to be from Nigeria or India. And I mean, I'm Nigerian, so obviously you know what I'm rooting for. But to me, it is about strategy. You know, what's happening right now in Silicon Valley and kind of the same old. That's where a lot of the ideas were in the last 20, 30 years. But after a while, you strike gold, you strike oil, but after a while, the land will dry up. And you have to be smart and strategic about where you look for new ideas. And by simply giving a voice to those who haven't had a voice, I think we will automatically get some groundbreaking ideas. And so that was critical from a strategic perspective, to make sure that we were looking where people aren't looking, and knowing that these people, they're not anomalies. They're serving customers. And I mean, most people around the world look like me. Why aren't we thinking about leading product development teams with people who look like me? So that's on one side. But then there's other things, too, that I think have helped us as a team, again, to just make sure that we're constantly pushing ourselves. We, with the close of our round, moved up to Harlem. And it was really funny because a lot of people will close the round and then move out of Harlem. And we closed our round and moved into Harlem. And people asked why. And I said, well, again, to me, from a strategic perspective, I want to make sure that we are close to the people who we'd want to hire, and this isn't a difficult thing for them to come to us. We want to be close to the top universities here in New York, and we want to represent a company, or represent what it means to be a company that believes in being as close as possible to the people who often aren't considered tech people or entrepreneurs. And we're not doing it for charity. We're doing it because that's our way of really incorporating them as closely as possible into our product development. And ultimately, I think it's going to be the thing that sets us apart.
Perfect. I really love Jess's comment around looking where other people aren't looking. So with that said, Matt, are there some places, particular pipeline organizations that you're thinking about when you reach out for your own recruitment practices?
So it's a two-sided coin for us. Diversity is the easiest thing that we face as far as recruiting is concerned, because all of our co-founders, like, I'm a black man, Tanya Menendez is Latina, and our chief product officer is a white female. So we always have people from different backgrounds applying. I think that the part that a lot of people don't oftentimes talk about is the challenges that come with that, because now you have a diversity of backgrounds, economic backgrounds and otherwise, that now you have to weigh this out and understand, where do I point my product? Obviously, if you're in Harlem, that's who your target market is. Like, we're trying to help American small, medium-sized businesses, so that's no matter where you come from, produce products. And so we try to, in many ways, it's not just ethnicity, but it's also from a variety, like people that come from more wealthy families maybe don't have the issues of sourcing, but there's a lot of other issues that they come from, and there's a lot of simplicity that's there too. So in a lot of ways, we're trying to take the people that have absolutely no resource to sourcing, to product development, anything like that, and groom them all the way up to the point where they don't have as many problems. And it sometimes can be a challenge, because some people will disagree with your direction because it's not reflective of their own issues that they had when they were growing up and trying to start their own companies. So maybe that's something that's not the best rainbowy thing to say, but you're going to have challenges with that as well.
No, most definitely, and it is a concept that I think when we talk about diversity, and even in the Valley, or what I've known in New York growing up here, it's very much gender-focused, ethnicity, and race. And I think it's important to start thinking about that diversity encompasses a lot more than that as well. So I really appreciate that perspective. Ben, you had before mentioned that your staff is bilingual, a majority of your staff. How does that in itself, how do you believe your company's mission or customer base, similar to what Matt mentioned, has made you prioritize diversity and inclusion?
I mean, it's a little bit of what I said before. I mean, it's about language, but it's also about comfort. I mean, I think we look for a lot of people who've had some experience. So our folks spend all day, every day, enrolling people in food stamps, Medicaid, and there's some phone stuff that they do. In order to do that, they have to ask very sensitive questions about family composition. Does grandma live in your house? Do you have a cousin who lives in your house? Children who are, so if you have a child from your sister, if your sister's child comes and lives with you, or your brother's child comes and lives with you because of an abusive family, that child counts for purposes of Medicaid and food stamps. We want that to be included. It's critical for the family. These are the kinds of conversations my team has every single day. And if you don't believe that you can have that you have to have some life experience to have that conversation, I'm just going to tell you you're wrong. I mean, it's so hard, because that, and that is where we deliver the most value. So for us, again, going back to mission, it's about having those conversations. It's about really caring about who's on the other end. We have situations where it can take us up to 4 hours to do a Medicaid enrollment because of the way the state is a disaster. And so it really kind of comes around those things. And that's what we hire around. And what we find is if we do that successfully, we have a very diverse staff. The language is, you heard the numbers, we're almost half Latino, Hispanic. It's driving a lot of that. I would tell you that some of the folks we're counting as in some of the other categories speak a host of other languages. We have a woman on our team who speaks Farsi, Russian, and then like most of the other European languages. And she's the one person on our team. We make people do a food stamps app, and hers got rejected on a bunch of different levels, in large part because they wouldn't. She migrated when she was very young, and they were having problems with our Russian conversion. And so we get a weird set of things that come up on our. But to your point about diversity, it's very hard to manage a staff like that, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but you just have a lot more. You have to deal with a lot more sensitivity. You have issues that are going to come up that you're not going to expect. I mean, often, I was making fun of TFA, but kids who come from very privileged backgrounds and went to great universities in our place sit beside people who went to have a totally different educational experience, and that can sometimes be difficult, in large part because there are different expectations about what the world should be giving these folks.
Got it. So we spent a lot of time kind of talking about the hiring piece, but the next part, right? So you've gone through, you know that your CEO is most definitely committed to diversity inclusion. They're setting up a culture that values it tremendously. You get all these people in from the top of the pipeline, and you extend an offer. But what about retention? So Jess, I'd love to hear from all of you. Talk a little bit about maybe 2 or 3 retention practices that you've put in place.
So it's not just about getting people in the door. You want them to stay and do amazing work and be collaborative with everyone on your team. So when we're hiring, even if we're not hiring somebody who contributes to one of our diversity goals, we make sure that every single person we hire has an inclusive attitude. That's a really important part of our hiring practice, because your entire team has to be supportive of this initiative. We have also standardized our performance management practices. So we have quarterly goal setting that is standardized across the entire company. So in terms of performance management, there are very clear expectations of what is expected of every person each quarter. So that ensures eliminating some either unconscious bias in performance evaluation, and it also takes away some of what is more typically associated with white corporate cultures, where there's just an assumption about what is expected from a performance management standpoint. So we make that really clear in no uncertain terms of this is what's expected of you for the end of this quarter, and then we do bi-weekly check-ins to see where people are, and that way we can provide different interventions or new strategies or new supports as is necessary to make sure that everybody is being successful. We've also introduced pillars of inclusion for the organization. So the 4 pillars that we have are knowledge, self-awareness, humility, and courage. So the knowledge goes to the fact that it's on you to continue learning about this stuff. You need to be knowledgeable about the communities in which you work and serve. You need to take it upon yourself to learn about the people that you work with. If you are working with somebody that had a very different upbringing than you, ask questions. Do it respectfully, but learn about where they come from. Learn about what their life was like, and educate yourself. Humility, nobody gets the diversity trophy and is done for life. Like, we like to say, diversity and inclusion is like hygiene. It's something you have to do as frequently as brushing your teeth, right? You have to keep at it, keep working at it every day. It is a lifelong process. Nobody is like a diversity and inclusion expert. Everybody's working at it all the time. And there's always something new for you to learn. Self-awareness, like, try to be aware when you're being a dick. And, let people know if they're not aware so that they can learn to be more self-aware over time. And the courage piece is both have the courage to ask questions when you don't understand something about somebody, but also have the courage to speak up if you see something that's not okay. And we hold everybody accountable to that. And we also hold ourselves externally accountable by talking about this with other companies in the city, by writing about it, and by signing the founder's commitment with Kippur.
So everyone here on this panel is a CEO, right? But as you're also building out your company, we talk about building out diversity from the employee perspective often, and sometimes it's lost. We lose the fact that there's diversity or lack of diversity on boards, right? Who are ultimately making a lot of decisions on the company along with the CEO. So Ben, would love to get your perspective on how that's been when you're kind of putting together your board.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, I'd love to hear everybody's experience, but like, your board is going to be comprised of people you pick as founders, so people who actually started the company, and then your money, whoever puts the money in. And there is not a high level of diversity among the people you are raising money from. There just isn't. I mean, we have one woman of color on our what is now a 7-person board. And sort of interestingly, she was an investor of ours. We are going into another round, and in a crazy moment, this is the reason why you should be working hard at this. We are sitting across from 3 women of color negotiating the terms of our next round. So there's a reason to be aware, but it is really, really, really hard. And I would suggest that we're up here. I think we will all agree that it's about perspective. And there is not, even across whatever your definition is, there is a lot there. The idea structure, or the way in which people think from the money side of this equation, is not especially diverse. Even if the person sitting across from you in that situation is diverse or comes from some kind of diverse background. And it's a huge, huge challenge. It's a huge challenge for a mission-driven company like ours, because you are constantly fighting to ensure that the values you've tried to drive into your company are going to be allowed to stay there as you go from, we raised an A a year ago, we're going to be raising a B soon, and it gets harder and harder and harder to keep those priorities. And the only way you can do that, I think, my recommendation is try to, this is not always possible, but try to raise money from people you really respect and who are going to stand behind your mission, because that's the kind of, diversity is the wrong word, but that's what you really want. Because if they're not prepared to stand there, you're going to end up having fights internally about trying to maintain what's important to you and trying to maintain the kind of work environment that I think we all are trying to keep in our places. So I don't know. Do other people have thoughts about it?
Great. So I know we only have 10 more minutes, so there's one question that I really want to get everyone's perspective on. As CEOs, you set culture, but how do you encourage people who aren't CEOs to work on building a diverse and inclusive culture, right? They're not the ones necessarily hiring, but how do you go about giving folks an advice? Because when we actually did a poll of hands, I didn't necessarily see a lot of CEOs. I saw people in recruitment, people in other functions. So if we could start with Matt and then go down, I'd love to get that perspective.
As far as culture is concerned, I've found that the CEO can set the ball off on a certain course or create certain parameters, or, you know, at lunchtime we're going to talk about where you come from or different things that inspire you, and that's great, but it has to be something that's coming from the team as well. They're as much establishing this culture as much as I am. That's what I look at. And so as we start to, and we've started to do this more and more, just doing more team building exercises where it's just kind of lighter, you know, just like bring in a music video that you really like and that's kind of representative of where you come from and or how you feeling that day, all that sort of stuff. So we see everything from grab backs from Green Day to Rihanna and all such as that. And so they break down oftentimes what certain art means to them, what certain music means to them, and it's just a much lighter way to kind of infuse this as opposed to I think that oftentimes, like, if anyone finds something offensive, then you're going to start talking about diversity, and then you're going to start talking about how important it is. So doing more and more frequent and yet lighter things that people are able to introduce to you their lives and their struggles, or even some of the things that they find easier and why that is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more when you were saying that. I remember when Lemonade came out, and we the next day played it on repeat for like 7 hours. It was tough on some people, but on others, it was so uplifting, and so it was actually really funny. Like all the girls are just kind of getting more and more hyped, and but I think, you know, for us, this I think relates to the whole common theme and thread. Like, you know, we were talking about the difficulty of running a diverse team, because no matter what the CEO may say or the executive team might say, when you're not in the room, that's when you know if diversity is happening, or if it's actually effective. And that's why for me, the biggest thing is, like, I'm not looking for unilateral diversity. In fact, where I hope to have no diversity is whether or not someone in some way, in their own way, understands struggle. And what I found is that by breeding a culture where we are so excited and open and willing to hear about each individual's point of struggle, and then realizing and making sure everyone understands that that is where we have our shared common bond. So we are all human beings that understand struggle, and whether my struggle is about being a black woman, or this person struggles about being a Jewish man, or whatever we're going through, we respect each other's struggle, we listen to each other's struggle, and we say, and so really the only person who is excluded from our group is like someone who in no way in their lives, some socioeconomic or some, has ever experienced struggle. And those people I'm okay not including. I don't want that diversity. Like, because I don't think that is the strategy for my business. I'm not sure what I'm going to get with that. Like, I can Google anything you're gonna bring to the table. And like, I think there's a lot, I'm just being honest. And there are so many people, and the point is to realize that, again, like, struggle can mean that you came from a certain background, or that you have a certain, there's just so many different ways to describe struggle that I think it ends up being more inclusive than we think. And in doing that and creating a platform where people can share that, like we had a very big thing. We just moved to Harlem, and we moved next to a church that is known for putting up very hurtful things about gay people, about people of different races. And after the Orlando attacks, they put something that was so hurtful up, specifically to a member of my executive team, and he almost didn't want to come into work. He was crying. And I said, go and buy the biggest motherfucking flag you can find, and we're gonna put this shit out, and we're gonna show him who he's talking to. We're right next door. And like, everyone, you didn't have to be gay, everyone was behind it, because we knew as a team that, like, this was a point of struggle for one person on our team or two people on our team, and we were going to share in that, and we were going to help them get through that. And that didn't have to happen because I said, you guys, let's lead this march. It was something that's part of our culture, and I think it makes people feel really safe. And when they do feel safe and when they do feel open, that's when I believe innovation and brilliance comes out. And the second half is then to push the business strategy of that. So to your investors, you say, this is why we do this, because look at this idea that just came out. Look what we're going to build now that no one else is going to build, because we went that far. And so that, to me, is the solution, to make this more about finding that common ground, finding that humanity in everyone.
Are we tight on time right now?
Yep, we're...
All right, I'll let it go.
No.
Okay.
Why don't you close? One more comment, if we can have one more
Sure.
comment, and then we will wrap up and do Q&A.
I think that the struggle is always something, everyone's individual struggle is always very important. But I also find that when you only, if you only cover struggle, then I think that it can oftentimes, and someone else doesn't have that same type of struggle, it can kind of put other people on edge where they don't want to talk about where they come from. One thing that we try to do is we even try to do a desk swap. Because usually, maybe certain ethnicities are prone to being in certain categories or certain departments. So what we try to do is we try to switch people up just so that they engage in everyday conversation with one another. And just the everyday conversation allows there to bleed in the, here's my everyday existence. Yeah, I mean, some of these things are much more challenging than you might experience, but it's also like, I want you to be aware of it. Like, there's this whole, like, taking a year off that most people in the Black community just don't get, because if you miss a year, you can't afford to miss anything, right? You have to keep on going, keep on trucking. And so I think that it's also important to talk about that as far as how did that help you develop as a person to take that year off, because I didn't have that year. I'm not going to be angry with you right now. I'd rather just hear exactly how it helped.
To quickly just, I'm sorry, to speak to that though, I think that's exactly what we're saying, that I don't think that by focusing on the fact that everyone comes from a different place and has struggle, that they should like hold anger, as much as about creating a platform where everyone feels comfortable sharing that and seeing that the shared human experiences, even if your struggle is different from my struggle, that we both come from a place where we've experienced that. And I think that just becomes open dialogue. And the way we do it is, either forcing people to listen to Lemonade and speak to it, yes, is probably more of a joke anecdote, but the reality is that our director of community, Nick Navarro, has done an amazing job of creating platforms and open opportunities, sometimes more playful, sometimes more serious, for everyone to speak about a time where they felt, for example, less than. And I think that it's easier than you think to realize that people actually do want to speak about those things.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch on one thing, because there were some, so there are the soft sides of it, like you want to make everybody feel included. I also feel a real obligation as we got to about 50 to put my foot down a whole set of things that are not okay, right? And that goes from client. I mean, the one thing that I was thinking about, we had a client where we send our team into a whole bunch of different settings, and there were some settings where, for example, our team got harassed, and the manager, it didn't filter up to me very fast with the manager. And I put my foot way up that guy's ass, because I'm just like, you can't let this happen. These are our team members. This is not acceptable behavior. And it's something we have made as a senior management team an effort to be sure about. Like, we hold people accountable for a lot of things, and we have a sort of, we like to say, a strict no asshole policy, but it encompasses all of these things. So there are a lot of soft things you have to do on the positive side, but as a leader, I believe pretty strongly that when something happens and it doesn't filter up to you fast enough, that boils down to these issues, two people aren't getting along, you've had a problem, and that doesn't filter up to you, or it doesn't get resolved by somebody on the junior team, you gotta really come down on them. Because if you don't, you're sending a wrong message. I mean, it just is, right? And I love to talk about the nice side, because that's the fun part. Not letting it go is the most important thing you can do as the company gets bigger.
Right. Well, that concludes our panel. I think we talked a lot about how we go about establishing culture, making sure that not just the CEO, but the team is also part of building that D&I culture. It's not just about top of the funnel retention, but it's also about, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it goes from hiring to retention to all the other things that are necessary to make sure that you continue to have an inclusive workforce. So with that.